Hello, everyone. So today, Mr. Aaqib Javed has joined us from the UK, and he has worked in the legal field for quite a long time now, and he has been working towards getting a pupillage for the last 2 years. And under a fellowship, he's advocating for pro bono cases for people who are deserving and who can't afford to pay their dues in the UK. So today he's going to share us with his experience and his 2 year journey of getting a pupillage. He'll be starting his pupillage in September this year. Welcome, Mr. Aaqib Javed, and I'll let you start with the process. So you can start with explaining the process of getting a pupillage and what was your journey like. And if there are any questions from our audience, we'll take the questions, and you can write the question in the comment section, and then he'll be able to answer your questions about that.
Thanks, Imran. Thank you for that introduction, and thanks for Blackstones for having me. So the way that I wanted to discuss or structure this discussion would be to first talk about the BPTC itself, and also I know that many of our participants will be looking to doing the BTT because they'll be qualified in a different jurisdiction, most likely Pakistan. So that's where I want to focus on, and then develop that into how we can obtain pupillage, because the pupillage process itself is quite difficult, but the actual ability to qualify and obtain pupillage is also quite tricky, and I think that also needs to be clarified. So I think many of the participants will be qualified in Pakistan or in a different jurisdiction, and in order to obtain pupillage, what you need to do is to pass the BTT, which is a transfer test for the English and Welsh bar. And in order to do that, you have to apply via the BSB, which is the Bar Standards Board, and they regulate your participation within the English and Welsh bar. Now, before you can do the BTT, you need to clarify with the BSB that you may have any exemptions. So because you may have already practiced and you may be an established practitioner in Pakistan, you will have years of experience that many new students won't have. Therefore, you do not have to do all of the vocational or the academic training, but that's done on a case-by-case basis. So what you need to do initially is apply to the BSB and detail your qualifications and your expertise and experience, and they will then come back to you and advise you of what exemptions you may or may not have. So being qualified abroad does not automatically guarantee that you will have an exemption, but if you do have an exemption, it may mean that you do not have to do the entire BTT course. So there are two parts to the course, there's part A and part B, and I think I've done the BPTC, so I've not actually done the BTT, but I think part B is 4 modules long, and that is more practical and more criminal and civil litigation based. So I think one exemption is that you only do part B, which are those four topics. But another exemption might be that if you do want to apply for pupillage, your pupillage, rather than being 12 months, which is a standard pupillage, a whole year, might be 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. So it can vary.
Aaqib, can I add something here? So Blackstone started the bar transfer course here in Pakistan last year, and in the first session that we had 12 students, and all of them. So we were very careful in taking the students who will be eligible for the exemptions. So we took the students and then we applied the exemptions, and they all got exemption for part A, and they were only required to give 4 exams, like you mentioned, civil litigation, criminal litigation, ethics, and advocacy. And on top of that, almost all of them got 6 months exempted in their pupillage. But one of the students was lucky and he got 8 months exempted. So he was only required to give a 4-month pupillage. So he was only required to take a 4-month pupillage. Definitely there are a lot of students in Pakistan who are interested in becoming barristers. And a lot of questions that we get from that is, Okay, I have done the BTT course or BPTC course by going to the UK. With this Corona situation, I know things are kind of tricky right now. But after getting their call to the bar, they're very much interested in getting some hands-on experience in the UK and also qualifying as a barrister in the UK. So, if you can share us, what was your experience like? When did you start working towards your pupillage, and what was the first thing that you did?
Okay, so I did the BPTC in 2016, so it was a few years ago. But the way that I had actually approached the BPTC was that I had done a LLB, so a law degree, and then also my master's in law. And then actually, interestingly, I sought experience, so I knew that I had to obtain extracurricular experience beyond just academic studying. And I think this is particularly important if you are, say, a BPTC student rather than a BTT student, because you need that extra experience. So I remember I applied to work at the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. So I spent, I think it was 3 or 4 months in Lahore doing work at the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and I obtained that simply by looking at where I could apply my legal skills, and I wanted to do it somewhere abroad because for me that was more worthwhile. But of course, you can do these kinds of things wherever. It just so happened that there was a place in Lahore that was looking for interns. But that was before I did the bar course. Now, during the bar course, you obviously meet your competition because everyone involved, whether you're on the BTT or the BPTC, is in effect your competition because nothing is guaranteed. So when I was on that course, I realized that lots of people had experiences that were beyond mine. They may have volunteered in a law center, for example, or they may have actually been practicing lawyers, but instead of doing the BTT, they wanted to do the BPTC for whatever reason. And so, in order to bridge that gap, it was important that I did things like, for example, volunteering for a domestic violence charity. So that helped me draft witness statements and draft orders. Now, these were real witness statements and real orders taken to real, real judges and real courts. And so those practical experiences were really important because those were the first steps that I took towards actually engaging with the law in a very practical sense. And I think it's so important that you understand that the law is not just academia. It applies to so many different avenues in real life. And I think with a view on obtaining pupillage in England and Wales, it's also really important that when you make an application for pupillage, you can demonstrate on paper and also in person when you interview that you have experience of applying the law in in England and Wales, because that is the jurisdiction that you wish to practice in. So even though you may have good experience outside of the country, it's also important that you can show that you can apply English law in England. And I think doing things that aren't as glamorous as going abroad and interning somewhere like the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, but doing things that are very local can also be just as important. And I'm aware that I think for the B for the BTT, it's BPP that is the only provider, but for the BPTC, I think there are 5 or 6 different providers now, and they all have their internal pro bono projects, and they all have the facilities to signpost you to experiences that you can offer. So
So,
yeah,
you did your internship with the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. So that was in Lahore, right?
yeah.
And did you also work with the Human Rights Commission in the UK as well? Or so what I'm trying to actually ask is, so if there is a student, let's say he's enrolled in the bar transfer course with
Yeah.
us, and he does have the resources to go to the UK and do an internship, so he can build his application towards pupillage.
Yeah.
Or if there's a student who has gone to the UK for his BPTC, so what's the easiest way to get an internship that is related to law, where he's applying law within the UK?
So just focusing on the internship in Lahore, what I had done during my master's year, so this was 2 years before I started the bar course, is that I worked with Reprieve, which is an international charity, but the work was done remotely over computer, and that
Oh,
work was related to death row in Pakistan and looking at inmates who were sentenced to death in Pakistan. And what that gave me was, well, A, it was free, and B, it gave me exposure to Pakistani law. And when it came to applying for a more prestigious internship, I had some experience that I had acquired for free by doing research for Reprieve, and so I was able to demonstrate to the people hiring for the internship that I actually had a desire to engage in this kind of work. So internships are great, but they can be quite difficult to get. So the problem I think many people need to overcome is that you need to build up your experiences enough to make you a good candidate for those internships. It's very difficult, especially if you're pursuing an international internship with a view for it to mean something in England and Wales, to get that straight away. You need to accumulate your skills. And I think the best time to start is as soon as you start your undergraduate studies. But of course, it's never too late to demonstrate a real interest in a particular topic. And just to build on some of the internships that I've done, so I also worked in the West Bank, so Palestine, and the way that I got that internship was simply by spending a couple of days on Google, looking at various internships and just looking at things that I liked, but also that I could afford to do. So the organization that I did my internship with in the West Bank, they offered free accommodation, for example, and I was a student who was not in a position to pay for for accommodation abroad, but because I had looked and approached the most appropriate internship providers, I was able to then obtain something that really benefited me.
So, so the first was Human Rights Commission. Then you did a internship in the UK involving cases in Pakistan, and after that, you went out on Google and looked for other internship. So basically, the key is to find internships where that gives you an opportunity to apply UK law into practice. So if our students either are doing the bar transfer course with Blackstone, or going to the UK and doing their BPTC, or like you said, even when they start their undergraduate LLB degree, they should be always looking for internships that are somehow based or rooted in the UK, and they get the opportunity to work on UK law and applying UK law in different scenarios. Um, so and if I'm a student, I would think. Uh, so I'm starting these internships. How much is enough? How many internships are enough? How much experience is enough? What do you have to say about that?
So in terms of how much is enough, I think internships and also mini pupilages, which I'm going to discuss later. So there isn't a number that you can really quantify on what is enough. However, the real question is how many internships or how many mini pupilages do I need to demonstrate that I actually want to work in this particular area of law? Now, for me, for example, I did a couple of mini pupilages, which are shadowing barristers, but I'll discuss those later. And I did one in family law and one in criminal law, and I realized very quickly that I didn't want to do criminal law as a practitioner. So that for me was enough. Doing one criminal internship was enough. So I think totally. So um, the sum of my mini pupilages was about 3, and I did many internships. But once I identified what area of law I wanted to practice in and I could sustain a practice in, then I honed in and pursued internships purely in those fields. So try to find out exactly what you would like to do, and then try and pursue opportunities within that area. And it's completely fine if you are not entirely sure of what area of law you want to practice in England and Wales. It's just about doing enough to make sure that you have identified that what you want to do is what you can do. And that's also important because when you want to, or when you apply for pupillage and you are interviewing for pupillage, there will predominantly be two questions that pupillage providers will be concerned about. And the first is, are you committed to practicing within this jurisdiction? So is there evidence that you have pursued opportunities in England and Wales? And of course, if you have done things like domestic violence work, or worked for a charity, or pursued many of those legal research voluntary roles that BPP or other law schools might offer, then that's a good sign that you want to build a practice in that particular field. But also, I think, and especially with a short pupillage, chambers don't want you to simply be there to get qualified and then move on to a different area of law. Because like you said, if someone is doing 4 months, it it is quite easy to just think, well, this is just 4 months that I need to spend doing family law, and I'm never going to touch family law again. What chambers are looking for is a real commitment towards practicing that area of law for the duration of your career. So to really impress chambers, find
So
an area.
the chambers, do they have limited seats for pupillage? And I'm basing out of this question out of an assumption. And you can clarify if what I'm thinking or what we know is correct, that they have limited seats for pupillage, and they really want to give those seats to barristers, future barristers who will be committed with the chamber and with the area of law
Exactly.
that the pupillage is available in.
Yeah, that's precisely correct. And I think it's with the number of pupilages, it is very difficult to obtain. So if you take the latest figures, I think last year there were 385 pupilages offered during the entire year, and there were around 2,000 applicants. So it's very, very competitive. It's not impossible to obtain, but you do need to stand out. And of course, this year with the whole coronavirus lockdown, it's really affected chambers' ability to offer pupilages because pupils are paid directly by the chambers. So, as an example, barristers in the UK are self-employed, so they earn their own money and fund chambers. Now, the chambers then use that money to fund pupils. Now, because of the current situation, it's likely that there won't be enough funds to cover, say, 400 pupilages, so there will be a reduced number.
Okay.
So it is quite competitive, but there's also a separate process for BTT students because your BPTC students doing the full course, they will have to pursue pupillage like a normal student. However, if you've done the bar transfer test and you've got an exemption, you need to approach chambers and you need to inform them that I have a 6 month pupillage, or I'm exempt for 4 months, so I need to do 8 months, for example. And those are assessed on a case by case basis. So there is a difference between the BPTC students and the BTT students.
So does that play in favor of the transfer students, that they have less pupillage, or does it go against them?
So I think it's quite difficult to make a call either way. But what I will say is that the bar transfer test students, they're not competing against the 2,000 applicants for the 400 pupilages. They are applying to chambers and saying, I have an exemption. I am a qualified lawyer. I have legal experience. Will you accept me and train me for 4 months, 6 months, 8 months?
And after that, then they can benefit the chamber and work for the
Exactly.
chamber, and help them earn revenue. Okay,
That's right.
so I have this question. So I want to go to, so Aliza Masood is our currently second year student, and she is doing a University of London LLB. So there's a lot of students here in Pakistan. Either they study at Blackstone or at any other recognized teaching center of University of London. So they're not in the UK. So they are in Pakistan. So would it be correct, like you mentioned, that a student like Aliza, they can go online and they can look for internships that they can do online while staying in Pakistan, but have an element of UK law involved in them, and are based in the UK? Is that correct?
That's definitely possible. So doing remote projects and remote internships, I think will become a lot easier now because everyone has had to adjust and work
Yeah,
remotely. But
yeah,
even through the University of London, they will have their own pro bono projects that you can get involved in, even
yeah.
as a student who's working and studying abroad. So it's definitely possible. For example, my project with Reprieve, which was only death penalty, which was based on death row in Pakistan, that was completely online. I
All
was working in my spare time an hour or two a week, filling out a spreadsheet and doing research about prisoners and sending it across. Now that didn't involve me going anywhere. I was sat in my room at university, but it meant that I had the experience. So it's definitely useful. But what I will also say is that you don't have to do an internship in England and Wales. So, for example, the work that I did in the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, that the study that I participated in was based on women's role in the electoral system. So, what that showed was that I had interests concerning female participation in politics, and I was able to use that experience and to show that my motivations in that area and say, look, these are the subject areas that I'm interested in. And then I applied for a family set, which involves a lot of women because obviously women are affected by domestic violence and also affected by divorce, etc. So it's a more women-centric area of law. But I was able to use the experiences that I acquired in Lahore, which weren't really to do with Pakistani law, sorry, with English law. They were mostly Pakistani law, but then also use that to benefit me in England and Wales. So it's better if you find an opportunity that you can use and relates to England and Wales. But if you have a very local project and you are
right.
helping local citizens, that in itself is very worthwhile, and you should definitely get involved if it means improving your CV.
Okay, so we had a question from one of the members, and he's still waiting on his answer. It was a little out of the current conversation, so that's why we kind of skipped through it. So let me answer this question. So Advocate Tariq Yusuf is asking, how can we take admission for bar, and how much is the expense? So Tariq, if you want to do, there are two routes. You can either do the bar transfer course through Blackstone, and the cost is £7,100. That includes the BPP fee, the Blackstone fee, the bar standard fee, and all of that. And it's a 1 year program. Or the other option is to go to the UK and do your BPTC. And the cost for that can vary from university to university. And normally the cost of that is around 14 to 18,000 pound. For if you have a Pakistani LLB, you need to do a 1 year GDL, and then you need to do a 1 year BPTC, because you have to study English law before you can do your bar transfer. Sorry, BPTC. But if you have a University of London LLB, you're directly eligible and you can do your BPTC. So I wanted to answer, because he was complaining that is his second. It's not good manner. Still not given answer to my question. So Tariq, I've given your the answer to your question. We have another question from Aliza, and then another from Taha Ilyas. So Taha Ilyas is a graduate from Blackstone School of Law, and then he did his LLM, and after that he did his bar transfer course with Blackstone, and he is sitting for his exams in this August. So his question is, how has the pupillage changed after the introduction of the new placement rules? So like always, Taha is very informed, and his questions are very researched. So would you have some information on his question?
So I think you're going to identify exactly what you mean by new placement rules, because that's not something that I have looked into or I'm aware of, because all I know is that currently, because of the pandemic that's going on, there are fewer pupillages. But I also know that many of those pupillages are now taking place online. So even if you are currently a pupil doing pupillage in England and Wales, you will have to do many aspects of it online. So unless you can define what exactly you mean by new placement rules, I don't think there's anything more that I can add to that answer.
So I think there has been this change in the BPTC course itself. So they have done what they have done is they have put some of the courses in an online module where you study them and you see if BPTC is the right fit for you, and you study some of the courses by paying £1,000, and but the rest of them you have to be studied at UK. But should I ask you, have there any has there any been changes in terms of getting a pupillage, or the placement rules that are put in by the chambers? Have there any has been any changes in the last few years?
Okay, so just to build on the new format of the BPTC as it's now called. So there is a change, and some institutions. So there's an institution called ICA, which is ICCA. They are running a form of the BPTC which involves paying £1,000 to do, I think it's a civil litigation exam, which is quite difficult. And then if you pass, then you can pay the remaining, I think it's 12, 13, 14,000 pounds, however much it might be, to complete the rest of the course. Now, the purpose of this is to reduce the upfront cost that you need to pay for the bar course, and also it's to make, like you said, it's fun to make participants aware of whether this is the right course for you. In
All right.
terms of has it actually changed anything yet, it was due to begin this year, and I think it's still going ahead because much of it was remote learning. So the first part was always
Mhm.
going to be remote learning. So they were ahead of the curve when it came to this post-pandemic form of study that we have now. So there's nothing that's really changed. It's too early to say whether or not chambers think that it's any better or any worse than the current format. From a purely regulatory and qualification perspective, it's the exact same. So even though there's a new format, you will get the same qualification.
All right. And what about mini pupillage? So at Blackstone, what we do is in the third year of their LLB program, we give them an opportunity to work with with some of the senior barristers and advocates here in Lahore. So the students can build their resume while they are still in the last year of law school. And we call it, we do this activity under the umbrella of Law Clinic. So the idea is to give them exposure to real cases and some real casework. Uh, and we have also been thinking of offering mini pupillage where they can work with the different barristers within Pakistan. But what if a student wants to do a mini pupillage or work with a barrister? Like let's say if you have become a barrister, would any part of your job would require help from a person remotely? Is that a possibility?
So a formal mini pupillage online is it's not something that was in existence 2 or 3 months ago.
All right.
However, many chambers have now realized that mini pupilages, which are, as Eliza may well be aware, are so important towards building your CV and your resume. They were not taking place because students were prohibited from visiting chambers, and there was a complete lockdown. So I know of at least one chambers which is now offering online mini pupilages. That's Cornwall Street Chambers, and I will send you, Irfan, a message later on identifying exactly what where those chambers are and what the mini pupillage offering is. So I know that one chambers is offering mini pupillages online, and that will be exact same application process as doing mini pupillages um, uh, in person. Now, what I will say is that a good way to get a mini pupillage is actually approach barristers directly. So many students, and I was the same, feel like the only way to obtain a mini pupillage is to approach chambers, and then chambers will then filter your CV, your resume, your application form, and then if they think that you are good enough, they will offer you a mini pupillage. But because actually all barristers are self-employed, barristers have their own workload. So you can, if you want, and if you have a network or communication with barristers already, approach barristers directly and say, is it possible to shadow you or to assist you with a particular case? If you are in England and Wales right now, it will be easier because you can physically interact. So once the whole lockdown is over, you will be able to actually participate. However, if you are intending to do it purely online, obviously it's a different logistical issue because there are issues concerning data protection and how much information can be sent to Pakistan because it's not in the EU. So those are some regulatory rules that might prevent you from actually being able to do a complete mini pupillage. But there's definitely the opportunity to observe and also discuss cases. So mini pupillages are definitely still going ahead. Many are going ahead via online. I've only seen one that I know of, but I'll send you those details. And also approach barristers directly, because you want to make the most out of your existing connections rather than approaching chambers without knowing anyone. You are more likely to be able to acquire a mini pupillage by talking to people that you already know.
So one of our faculty member, Barrister Qureshi, so she works on transnational cases where she is representing women who have been divorced or who have separated from their husbands in the UK, and they have been sent back to Pakistan, and they've lost access to their children.
Yeah.
So the UK Parliament, they hired or they, I would say, she's doing it pro bono, and now she has been getting referrals and cases, paid cases as well. So she started and helping the British Parliament, and so she was helping them with those transnational cases. Now, let's say if a student from Blackstone or within Pakistan is working with Barrister Amreen Qureshi and assisting her in those transnational cases where the proceedings are being held in the UK, and if the student does that, so will that qualify, and will that be good? A skill set or a good section to have in their resume if they are applying for a pupillage later in the UK?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the best examples that I can think of in terms of using both Pakistani law and English law and working towards a particular objective. I think the example that you've given, if you pursue that and you are part of that project, then not only can you demonstrate your participation in the Pakistani jurisdiction, but also you can show chambers when you apply for pupillage that I have experience and exposure to the English legal system, and that is so important. So those kinds of projects that are hybrid and they bridge multiple jurisdictions, I think those are worth quite a lot, and it can be quite difficult to find those projects. But just building on that, I know that there has been work, I think, on looking at extradition as well between Pakistan and England, sorry, and the UK. And I'm not aware of exactly who is doing what right now, but I know that in the UK, at least over the last couple of years, there has been a lot of talk about extradition rules between Pakistan and the UK. So if you just try and find out who's doing something like that over in Pakistan, you can then actually pursue something in your home country, which is probably a lot more affordable as well. So it won't cost you as much, but you can then use that as genuine experience in a criminal set in England and Wales, for example.
All right. So one of the question was that if you can repeat the name, and another participant said that it was Cornwall Chambers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's Cornwall Street Chambers. So
Okay,
the
Cornwall
street,
Chambers. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you for that. And so, so let's talk about chambers. So, like so if you're applying for a pupillage, so you have built your resume, and while you're building your resume, you're looking for these opportunities. Not all opportunities can be found, but all the opportunities that can be found, if let's say a student has two options, it would really help our students or the legal fraternity here in Pakistan to know what kind of skill set is the chamber looking for. What should you be building? Like one of the few things that you have mentioned, that you should be really passionate about what you do, and you should be building your career within that particular field, either as family law, criminal law, or civil litigation, and then you should apply for the pupillage for that particular area. So that is, but that's very general. But in terms of specific skill set, what can you tell the audience and the students here in Pakistan?
Okay, so in terms of pure skills, what I think are the two most important skills, and obviously this is just my opinion, but I feel like these are the two most important skills. And the first one is quite obvious, it's good intellect. But the second one is not so obvious, which is good judgment. And I just build on those. So good intellect means that you have a demonstrated experience of obtaining good marks, good grades, and actually part of that is having good experiences, but also good references as well. So rather than just having a name of an internship provider on your CV, you have a testimonial or a reference from someone that you worked with saying this person did this, they were excellent. they will make a great addition to any chambers. And I think intellect is what you can probably expect, because any barrister needs to be able to read through legal text, apply the law, and also advocate. So this is common, but the more unusual answer is good judgment or sound judgment. And I think with this particular uh, quality, it's that sound judgment applies both to how you react under pressure, because as a practitioner, you will be put under pressure. You will have choices both in and out of court that you have to make for the benefit of your client. And so chambers are looking for someone that can apply sound judgment under pressure. But also from an ethical point of view, they want to see you as someone who's reliable, honest, and trustworthy. And say during pupillage or beyond something goes wrong, they know that you will try and identify the mistake, and you will work your way out of the issue, and be very honest. So I think one of the key one of the most common questions that I was asked during my pupillage interviews was, it was an ethical question. So what would you do if you found out something that you weren't supposed to find out from the client? Or would you breach client confidentiality for this reason or not? What are the rules? And the only real response I can give is, when you are studying, really learn your ethics, because you will be tested on in your ethics, not only in the exam, but also in the interview. So when I was interviewing, I was having all sorts of questions, really, really obscure and random questions. But in every single chamber that I went to, there was at least one ethical question that was designed to test my moral character, so to speak, rather than my legal character. And I think chambers really, really want to know that the person applying for pupillage is someone that they can put their trust in and they have faith in. So it's so important. So yeah, intellect, which is obvious and everyone should possess that, but also good judgment. And then of course you've got your other skills, like the ability to communicate with different people, because communicate communicating with a judge is very different to communicating with a client who knows nothing about the law. But you need to be able to communicate with both parties, and at the same time advocacy as well, and a real passion and desire to do what you want to do, because it can be quite a stressful job. So those are other two skills and a few other additions that I would give in response to that particular question.
So I'm going to invent a word here: legal wit. So can we put intellect and judgment under that umbrella? Said that you should be witty, but you should be witty not in a common sense, but in a very legal sense, where you are able to answer the question that is thrown to you by by the judge or your opposing counsel. And I think if you have those, again, it goes back to, I think, putting that hard work during your LLB degree, putting that hard work while doing an internship either in Pakistan or for a barrister in the UK, and really knowing the law and applying the law and making it a second habit. So what was the most difficult question that you were asked in a pupillage interview that you can think of?
So my previous interviews were actually quite a while away now, but if I can think back, I think so. Every I just go through a list that I can recall. So I don't have my notebook, which I've actually made a list of all the difficult questions, but I don't have that next to me right now. But every interview that I had, I was asked, "Why do you want to be a barrister?"
Okay.
And actually, saying that you are good or that you have qualities that are good in a barrister are not enough, because you need to demonstrate that you actually want to pursue this particular uh, vocation. And so identifying and knowing exactly why you want to be a barrister is so important. And I made the mistake in many interviews of saying I want to be a barrister because I think that I am a good advocate, or I think I can communicate. Well, everyone who is applying for this wants or thinks that they have those skills. So first of all, identify exactly why you want to be a barrister. Why are you there? So really highlight that in your application form and show your desire to pursue that particular prof- that profession, but also that area of law. And obviously, everyone will have different answers to those questions. but the answer should be genuine and it should be meaningful. So it should relate to your own experiences. So that was one of the tricky questions. I think other questions. So just to build on that ethical these ethical questions as well. I think ethical questions are quite interesting because they are designed to replicate real life court scenarios. And what ethical questions do is not have or not offer a correct or incorrect response. What they are intended to do is, can you demonstrate how you would get from this question to your answer, and what are the steps that you have followed? And I think it also builds on what you said, Irfan, about having a good and solid understanding and being legally witty, because once you identify the options and what the consequences of those options are, and if you can demonstrate that you understand all of that and you reach an answer, then it doesn't really matter what you answer with, as long as you can show that you understand all of the options available. So that's a response to an ethical question, but also you could use that response in many other pupillage questions. There are some really, really bizarre questions which I feel that are very UK centric. So they build on English mannerisms and English phrases. I think chambers are now phasing those out because some of them can be quite not dismissive of foreign experiences, but they can exclude many aspects of foreign culture. So, for example, you have things like, "What are your favorite English sweets?" And I was asked that once, and there is no real response to that. But also, if you're not from
Maybe it's,
England,
maybe it's Burfi.
exactly. But if you said that, would they understand? Which is a problem. But actually, they have stopped asking those kinds of questions,
Yeah.
thankfully.
So I think one of the things that when it comes to chambers, a lot of the students would be interested in knowing that what is the timeline like. So let's say a student who's received his call to the bar, and they have done their LLB. They have built 2 or 3 years of experience, and most of that experience is related to the UK. And they have done their bar transfer course, or they have done their BPTC, and they have finally received their call to the bar.
Yeah.
So, in what months do chambers are looking for pupillage for barristers to hire under their pupillage seats, and what is the line, and how many like interviews you have to go through, and all of that? If you can tell us about that.
Okay, so when you finish the bar transfer test or the BPTC and you pass it, you will then be called to the bar. Now, importantly, definitely for the BPTC, at the point of passing your exams, you have 5 years from that point to obtain pupillage. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Irfan, but I think the same applies for BTT. It could be a different period of time, but there is a time limit, and for the
Okay.
BPTC, it's definitely 5 years. So you are on the clock, so to speak. And what happens is, once you've been called, you have the opportunity to apply for pupillage. Now, interestingly, you can apply for pupillage during the bar course, but you can only start pupillage after you've been called. Now, very few, or not very few, but it's quite difficult to obtain pupillage during the bar course because A,
Mm-hmm.
you are studying and you are applying your knowledge to the exam. So really interviewing and applying for pupillage can be quite difficult. For argument's sake, let's just say you apply as soon as you are called. Now, the applications are done on the pupillage gateway, and that's pupillage gateway, and those contain 50% of chambers. The other 50% of chambers do their applications individually, so you need to go to their chambers website. Now, the good thing about the pupillage gateway is that even if the chambers are not hiring on the gateway and they are doing it independently, they will have all of their information on the gateway. So you log in and you make a profile. In February, applications start. However, in January, you are able to access the gateway and see what opportunities there are available. And so what you can do between January and February is see what kind of questions chambers are asking, and
Mm-hmm.
also find out which chambers are on the gateway and which chambers are off the gateway. Now, this is important because you can only make 20 applications on the gateway, which sounds like a lot, but actually it's not that many, because if you consider, when I was applying, I received interviews for about 33% of the applications that I made. So if you just use that as an average, it may be less or it may be more for many other people, but 20 applications on the gateway will get you 6 interviews. So if you just use that, so when I was applying, the gateway only allowed for 12 applications, but they increased it to 20. Now the good thing is that you can search for non-gateway chambers on the gateway. You can't apply via the gateway, but you can apply directly,
Yeah,
and there's
it's
no
a very
limit.
good thing to be looking for non-gateway chambers on the gateway. So
It
is
is.
this
Yeah.
is this the gateway thing? Is this like a is this a non-profit, or is this a public entity? What is this gateway, Pupilage gateway?
So the gateway is run by the Bar Council, and that's the Council of Barristers in England and Wales. So it's run by barristers, and essentially what it is, it's a platform that advertises pupilages. Some of
All
those
right.
pupilages you can apply for on the gateway. Some of those you can't. The timeline is very similar. So you apply from around February, and I think the gateway closes at the start of March or at the very end of February. So you only have 3 or 4 weeks to finish your applications. And then what you do is between March and April you interview. This year it's been very difficult, as you might imagine, with the cancellation of exams as well. So
Mhm.
there were many pupilages who either interviewed online or postponed their recruitment process. But in any case, what usually happens is that in May, so May the 6th, which is the pupillage deadline day, that's when announcements are made. So you've interviewed between March and April, and then you have the announcements on May the 6th, or May the 7th. I think it's the first Thursday or the second Thursday of the month. But the actual interview process, there are most often there are 2 interview rounds. And the first interview round, generally speaking, it's for the chambers to get to know you. So chambers has a committee who are called the pupillage committee, and from the pupillage committee they have interviewers. Now, when I interviewed, I had first round interviews, which were supposedly they were easier than second round interviews, but first round interviews can often be 2 people interviewing you. I remember, I think once I had 7 or 9 people interviewing me for a first round interview. So those are quite daunting and challenging. However, you then have to sit a second round interview. So if you consider that the first round, generally speaking, is to get to know you and get to know whether you'd be a good fit in chambers, then the second round is a real test of your advocacy abilities and your ability to do legal research. So the second round is a lot more technical, so to speak. And then some chambers have a third round, very rare. I have only heard of 1 or 2 that have third rounds, and this was a few years ago. So for the sake of argument, there are usually 2 rounds, and then early May you are given the results. And most of the chambers operate along the same timetable as the gateway, so you will hear back from on May. Now, what's important is that not all of the non-gateway chambers abide by the February to May timetable. So some may advertise on the gateway, but they may advertise for a deadline, say in June or July. So when I was applying for pupillage, and I obtained pupillage in my second year of applying, but what I had done is that in my first year I had followed the timetable. But that summer there were also chambers that were putting opportunities on the gateway. You could not apply via the gateway. You had to apply direct to chambers, but you were able uh, to follow that process outside of the typical pupillage process. So it's an all-year process, most focused between February to May, but there are opportunities being posted all year long. So it's always good to keep an eye on that.
All right. Going back to the discussion earlier, when you were talking about the Pakistan Human Rights Commission,
Hmm.
so I was thinking about that. So, like, we have this student who has done his LLM, and he has also done his he has done work with the AG office, Attorney General office in Pakistan, and then he has also acquired and worked with some of the very popular names in Pakistan. So, if a student is working with the Human Rights Commission or a federal government office in Pakistan, does that help in their pupillage application? The reason I'm asking that is, unless student does not find work that is directly related to the UK, maybe they can start from there and then they can build towards their experience towards organizations that are based in the UK.
Yeah, so just building on that, on those particular experiences. So say if you worked in the Attorney General's office in Pakistan, that means that you have a good knowledge of constitutional or public law matters, or at the very least, you've developed some criminal law skills as as well. So those are transferable skills. Just because they didn't use the law of England and Wales does not mean that the skills that you obtain cannot then be used in a different jurisdiction. So when you have that on your resume, just make sure that you really emphasize the transferable elements of the skills. So did public law research or assisted someone on a constitutional matter. So what you want to do is it's fine listing down your achievements, but your achievements, because it's quite often difficult to really project what those experiences are to a non-Pakistani audience, and it can
Okay.
be quite difficult to understand exactly what does the Pakistani Attorney General do, for example.
Okay.
What you need to do is actually make it really clear that this is what I did, these are the skills I obtained. So it's not
Okay.
good enough to just write the name down. You've got to really amplify your own skills and the attributes that you picked up from there.
All right. I think we have covered most of the areas. Is there anything that we have not discussed, and would you like to add anything before we wind up the discussion for today?
So actually, I just want to go over my notes to make sure that I've not missed anything out.
All right.
Um, so what I'll say is that there's a really good website, and it's called Pupilage and How to Get It. It's run by a practicing barrister who's quite junior and someone who's quite senior, and it's a very useful website. So that's Pupilage and How to Get It. There are so many resources. It's not the site to go on if you want to find internships or experiences, but it does give you a step-by-step guide on what pupillage is and exactly how you can obtain it.
All right.
Uh,
Great. Thank you.
Another thing is barristers love articles and love published work. So if you have the opportunity to even write in a student journal or in a human rights journal being published in Pakistan or in Southeast Asia or anywhere else in the world, and you can put your name to paper and actually show that you have published work, then that is so important. So I know that it's barristers like speaking and advocating, and it can seem slightly odd that writing is important, but writing is also a piece of advocacy. So if you have written articles and if you have published work, really demonstrate that experience and put that on your resume. In terms of actually, so I'm just looking over my notes, but I think we did actually cover everything. I think one of the golden rules that I have is that it's really important to be honest with yourself. Now, obviously, everyone trying to be a barrister thinks that they will become a barrister, but it's quite challenging to obtain, but it's not impossible. However, you need to be quite self-critical and really place scrutiny upon yourself and identify where you can improve. For example, if you want to be a criminal law practitioner, but your knowledge of criminal law or your practical experience is just not there, or it's difficult to put on your resume, then that's something that you need to invest in. So be self-critical, and it's a constant work in progress. So even when I was applying for pupilages, I was still doing things that I thought would benefit my CV. So that's a key tip. But I think that's everything that I have to say. I'm more than happy to stick around for a few more minutes to take any questions.
All
But
right.
I hope that what I've given is a snapshot into what the process is like, both for BTT and BPTC, BPTC students, and also what to expect during interview. But obviously, if there are any more specific questions, then I'm more than happy, Irfan, if you could email me them, or just let me know, and I'll do my best to respond.
Sure. I'll pass on any questions that come across. So we have a huge audience that will be watching this because it's going to stay on the page, and they'll be watching this video later on. And if they have any question, they can write that question in the comment section, or they can go to our inbox and send us a question, and we can forward that to you. And I think it was not just a snapshot. I think it was very detailed. In Pakistan, we started this bar transfer course just like 1.5 years back, and before that, nobody was offering this in Pakistan, and the only route was to do the BPTC. And for somebody to go from Pakistan to the UK and live there for 1 or 2 years and do the program can be very expensive. So we started this, but I think there were a lot of questions around how to get pupillage. As you said, it's not impossible, but it is difficult. But again, I mean, if you have dreams and if you want to be a barrister in the UK, then dreams don't come cheap, and you have to work your way through it. And so we wanted to invite you and so all the knowledge that you have, and because you have gone through the process, and I think it was very helpful. And if I was in the place of a student, and I had recently done my BPTC, or I was about to do my BTC, and I was about to get a call to the bar, or if I'm a law student, I would be building my application. And being a part of Blackstone, what I can do is I can pass on this information because we talk to students every day, and there are a lot of questions about pupillage. So thanks a lot for joining us. And so you'll be starting your pupillage in September, and you'll be done with your pupillage in 1 year, right?
That's right. So because I am a domestic student, I can't benefit from any exemptions that the BTT students might be able to. So I'll be starting in September and hopefully finishing in September 2021. And after then, I will no longer be a pupil barrister. I'll be a practicing fully qualified barrister.
Okay. Best of luck. And once you start your pupillage, I don't know how the ethics work around it. Would you be able to talk about your experience working through your pupillage? Maybe then we can invite you again, and you can share your experience. Would that be possible?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I think it'll be of real benefit, especially towards people who are looking to do family related law as well, because my pupillage will predominantly be in family law. So if anyone is interested, then I'm more than happy to come back and discuss.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and taking out the time and answering all the questions. And it was very helpful. Thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks to Blackstone for all the good work that they do as well.